Now that the carriage has been taken care of and put safely away, it's time to remove the top frame. It's much easier to take off than it is to put on. There's a little bit of a maneuvering you have to do to get it back on. One of the first things I like to do is remove the type wheel if I can. If not, I'll do it after. But this safety pin type clip just gets turned 90 degrees, which forces it out of the little groove and just lifts right off. Unfortunately, most of these, that's not the case. Usually it's old dried oil and ink and dirt and some oxidation of the brass sleeve in the center will cause these to be pretty well bonded to the shaft. By the way, this part here that this rotates on is actually called the shaft. This pin behind it that causes it to rotate is called the carrier pin, which was later replaced with a flat piece, and instead of a slot here, that was later replaced with a square opening. So this, from an 1896 or 7 right up through about 1898 or so, these type wheels will not work with the later one with the square cut out and well, a square or rectangular carrier pin. So the way I would out of these machines that I've done, most of them were stuck pretty solid. This one came right off. Typically what I do is very carefully get some penetrating oil down in around the end of the shaft itself so it runs in around the sleeve. Doesn't do you any good to have it on the wheel itself. So, and sometimes you even have to put a little bit on this pin to get that free, and sometimes you have to chip the pin out because it's so corroded. But once the pin is out of the way, and I like to take it completely off when I have to do this, I can wipe away any excess penetrating oil that I do not want to have it harm this vulcanized rubber. It's fairly delicate, extremely lightweight piece, and yeah, it doesn't interact well with the penetrating oil, which I use liquid wrench. It's probably as good as any. And it doesn't seem to harm these. I have gotten some on these, and it usually wipes right off. And once I do get it off, I give this a little bath in very lukewarm water, never hot, with some Dawn dish liquid, and then clean it off. I swish it around a little bit in there. You do not want it to soak because you don't want it to absorb any moisture. And then since this surface here protrudes, I can just stick it upside down and let it air dry out of its own holes. And the other thing that works well on these is to line it up with the carrier pin and with the shaft. The other thing that works well, and you can actually snap it on, is to turn it upside down, pull this down, and just put oil right on the shaft itself and let it flow down against the that brass sleeve, and the capillary action should draw it into the gap there. It's cleaner on the back side than on the top, so it will typically get in better. And don't try to wiggle it side to side. There is basically almost no play at all between the carrier pin and that slotted part in the type wheel itself. And so you'll only hurt it. You have a chance of, there's a metal insert in there where that slot is, and you have a chance of dislodging it and ruining the type wheel itself, and I don't think anyone wants to do that. So once you do get it free, and like I said, you can let it sit a day, 2 days, a week, whatever it takes, but eventually you'll be able to push it up and get it off. Right now I have the clip on there still, so I'll rotate the clip, get it out of the way, and I'll put that someplace safe where it won't get harmed. So then we have this whole top frame comes off, usually with 2 screws. Some of the later ones had 4, but it's all the same pretty much. Hopefully you've had penetrating oil sitting on these screws and getting in around into the threads. And so anyway, now what I'm going to do with a proper fitting screwdriver, because you don't want it so wide that it's going to chip the paint off, and you want it to make sure it's a really nice fit, not much play. These were actually loose when I got the machine, and that was part of the reason it was damaged, was because these weren't tightened up, and because this was allowed to sit higher, it allowed even more keys to fall out and get damaged. So it was not great. I still don't know what I have in here, really. This is untested at this point, so it's probably a pretty good example to work on. Of course, my screws are going to go in here. These screws are unique, so I don't really have to put them someplace special to know where they go. And this just lifts right off. This is what matters when you're putting it back on. This has to be on top of the comb. If it's not, it won't work. But you'll know right away that it won't work. So right now I'm going to put the machine itself over here, and later on I'll put it completely out of the way. Generally, nothing has to be adjusted. This piece, because it has a lock nut and it's threaded into the frame itself, I've never seen one of those move, and it just determines how far this comes back. I won't go into how to adjust everything, because typically it doesn't have to be adjusted. This is part of the part that pushes raising this up enables this shaft to move for shifting. And to get to you have 3 levels of characters. You have the lowercase up top, uppercase in the middle, and then your characters are the bottom row. So you have 2 levers here, capitals or uppercase, and figures, which are the characters. And here you have the ink frame, it's called. And what it has is a small felt roller with a brass sleeve inside of it. This one's very worn and probably original to the machine. And what that does is as the type wheel comes forward, before it strikes the key, it will hit this type wheel, push it out of the way, but it will also put ink on that character or that figure, and then it will come down on the paper. So rather than using a ribbon like a carbon, instead this one actually uses ink right onto the type wheel and applies the ink itself to the paper. They used to use an oil-based ink, which is rarely available. I haven't even found any. We tend to use water-based. So when you use a water-based, you want to make sure at the end you take this little ink roller off and clean the little shaft that goes on, because it is steel and you don't want these parts rusting. And you'll see that there is a little V shape here, and that's where this goes in to keep it in position. So if you see it looking off, which this one does when it's up top, don't worry about it. As long as it comes into that V, it should be in the right position to hit the character okay, and you shouldn't have to mess with it. The other things I'm going to take off is the paper guide itself. It needs polishing and cleaning. And what this is this, you move it over and it will tell you where your character was, or where it's going to type. So if you have to back this thing up, it does not have a backspace. The later number 6s did, and a few others did, but this early number 5 did not have any kind of a backspace. So if you want to back up, you just bring this lever down, and when that comes to where you want to be, you just raise it back, let it go back up, and you hit the key. So, but this right here lays on top of the paper, and this is the paper guide. And so that keeps the paper down nice and flat. And it's basically it's its own spring. So you just have a thumb screw here that goes into it, and you can see rotating it moves it. It just has to be tight here. All of this stuff is going to have to come off. It's really very basic. And if I do have to take the ink frame off, it's a single screw, and I can adjust where it's hitting on the roller and the height of it because this is slotted. So all of that stuff is very straightforward. I don't know yet if I'll have to adjust that. That'll be in the final video when I do all the adjustments on this machine. These 2 pins here that are held in place, well, they're locked in with these screws. These determine, well, that's what this whole mechanism rides on. And also they determine where it sits. You want it to be sitting where this opening comes down on that opening comes down on this piece, nice and perfectly. And because that's, you don't want to stress any of this on the magic wheel or anything else. And I'll show you how to do that when we're done. Usually these don't have to be removed at all. You do want to put some penetrating oil in here and here where you can, so that you can have the mechanism lubricated. If it's sticky, you probably have to pull it off. This one's not sticky, but I'm going to pull it off anyway, partly to show, and partly because these were already, one was loose and one was out, and so I have to adjust this one anyway in the end, so it really doesn't matter at this point. What I would normally advise someone to do is take one out first, if you have to take them out. So loosen that screw a little bit. You can actually push it over, push the whole mechanism over to pull the pin out. So make a note if they're sticking out evenly. It doesn't have to be, dead on, but it has to be fairly close. So I'm going to knock this one out too. And you can see they're stepped. And the step goes into the, there's always extension springs on these things. The step goes into this, the hole in the end, the bearing. So it's plain bearings. There's no mechanical bearing in there. Those go in there to hold it and allow it to rotate. So we get those out. And ordinarily I wouldn't leave that out, but I'm going to it in this case because it's just as easy to lubricate it out, or maybe easier than in. I'm going to just take this extension spring, and with a jeweler's screwdriver, I'm going to rotate it, the hook out of the casting. And this is really the beauty of this device. You have here's your magic wheel behind this gear-shaped piece, and you can see how far off center it is. And I will show pictures of it, but it's really a beautiful thing. But these are the gears that actually rotate the wheel, and then, like I said, this locks into the magic wheel. It's called, and to get in the position, and then the final real lock is this going over the piece on the frame. And when I have this off, I always put penetrating oil in anything that's going to move. You do have some holes here that I assume are for oil, and if not, they still work great for oil. Anything, any spaces between these gear racks, any place basically is going to move, should be oiled at this point. So we'll put that to one side. And like I said, the next thing is actually to take this apart, whatever you're planning to take apart. This does not really go out of position. It has a little piece right here that goes against the frame, and that's just where it goes. There is no positioning. It just runs on a screw, has a little piece of spring wire. And then on this side, you just have this single screw, and that comes off. And like I said, the ink frame, that comes off with a single screw too. So there isn't really much to do on this. You just want to make sure you keep it orderly. And what I am going to do is I'm trying out a new rust remover, because if I start to just go after this and try to get it look more presentable, I can see that there's some of this plating is actually lifting, because unfortunately they plated nickel right onto steel, and nickel doesn't adhere well to steel. It usually has to be copper plated and brass plated and then nickel plated. That's triple plating. So I am going to take these pieces off, and I'm going to put them in a bath. And I also need to replace this extension spring here, or at least rework it. I might be able to rework it. Just bring one extra loop. You can see that someone has stretched it out, probably trying to get it on or off at some time. And I'm just going to cut it and then recurve the loop, and I'll be using those jeweler's wire bending pliers to do that. I get a nice loop on it and then reattach it, and even with 2 or 3 coils out, it should work fine. I do have spares, but I'd prefer to keep my spares where they are. So right now, like I said, I'm going to put those in a bath, and I'll see how that works. And if I can remove the rust without having to polish, that's that much better, because I won't remove any more nickel than I have to. And then after that, I'll give it a nice, I'll use the Simichrome and give it a nice little polish on those pieces. Oftentimes, this is nickel plated also. That often needs to be polished. You don't want to over polish it because you'll get down to brass, and then it won't look right. So, and that's actually only held on, this one's held on with what looks like two small rivets, but they were often a little brass brads that was held onto, and they were just bent over on the underside. These may be those too, but were pounded over instead of just bent. Later ones were just bent. And then I'll use actually a bicycle frame cleaner to clean the paint or Japanning on this, because it doesn't damage any kind of paint. Or the Japanning's very tough anyway, as you can see. For about 130 years old, it's still in very nice shape, and typically they are. That Japanning did very well. So I'm going to go do that, and then I'll continue with the video. I'm pretty pleased with the way the rust remover worked. It's supposed to be one that you can use indoors. I still covered the tub, but it basically doesn't have the harmful fumes or anything else. I did wear rubber gloves because you don't want to get it on your skin. You don't want to get it in your eyes, of course. And you just rinse them off with water, and then I lightly clean them with a little, lightly polish them with a little Simichrome. Here's the reworked spring, and the, actually this is a different spring, but I still had to rework it. I still had to put a new loop in it, but the old spring is sitting there. But it's all cleaned up. I dismantled it, oiled it. Everything's working fine. One thing you have to be careful of on these is this little piece here that moves out to allow you to either insert or remove the felt roller. That can be very delicate, and so put some some penetrating oil on there. Work it very slowly to get it started, and be patient with it because you don't want to break that off. And so anyway, now it's just a little bit of reassembly. It's basically reversed of what came off. This goes on this little shoulder screw. I also like to put my screws back where they came from, and that way there's no confusion as to which screws go where. So I'll spare you the details of me just screwing this together. I'll show it completed, but I was happy with that evaporust solution. Did a nice job. It made it so that I didn't have to do much polishing. I'm not going to try getting these little stains out because I'll only damage more of this nickel that's already pretty fragile at this point. But this was all rusted down through here, and it didn't take much to clean it up, and it doesn't look great if you look at it up close, but when you actually see it assembled as a unit, it's not noticeable. It just looks like an aged machine. So anyway, I'll get that done. I'll get it assembled and just show you that, and that'll be the end of this video. So the reassembly only took a few minutes. It's very simple. I do put a drop of oil on every screw, the threads of every screw, before they go back into the casting. And someone 50 years from now might be thankful for that. It's more important on the aluminum machines than these iron ones, because the aluminum ones will actually pretty much bond to it, and I've had some trouble getting the screws out of them, but I've never had one that I wasn't able to get them out of. So anyway, the ink frame is back in. I did measure from the end of this slot to the head of the screw before I removed it, so I know exactly where it went back in. It still may need some adjustment once I get it back in place and try to get the typewriter functional again and see how it types. But for right now, it's this unit's ready to go. I'm going to go and get the main frame and start to take that apart. So anyway, this is the end of this video, and we'll be moving on to the main frame, removing the keys and the combs, and servicing that and doing any polishing, anything else that's necessary. So anyway, here we go.